But without further ado, I wanted to do a quick intro, bio, and summary for Jeff Laszlo. Jeff's been the managing partner at Granger Ranches. Boy,
that's it.
Forever, right? but fourth generation family, stewards of that land and overseers of the ranch operations there. He's the chairman of the Western Land Owners Alliance.
And a good guy. You left that part out.
That part's actually bold at the bottom. So, so Jeff's been dedicated to the Madison Valley and to the Madison River watershed for pretty much since you were knee-high to a bullfrog, as they'd say, right? So I don't want to steal any of his thunder, things he's going to talk about, but I got to tell you, Jeff's a pretty amazing and outstanding man. He's an outstanding conservationist, and in his heart runs a river pure and cold. So he's a man that I've come to grow close to and that I idolize for very different reasons and maybe some others. But 17 years, last 17 years, he's been working on this project on Odell Creek and on their property, along with property partners. They've restored over 15 miles of the Spring Creek fed stream. They've restored hundreds of wetland acres, restored habitat for migratory birds and animals. They've improved the habitat for the different native species, including some of the fish we have here in our valley. And really has just created a Shangri-La for flora and fauna in the Madison Valley. So they are an agricultural operation. And that's one of the reasons why Jeff's here, is to talk about how they're able to have that symbiotic relationship between ag and environment. And it's a pretty amazing thing. So without any other ado or additions, I'm going to go ahead and turn the rest of the time over to Jeff. And Jeff, how do you want to do the questions? Do you want to wait till the end?
Yeah, let's wait till the end.
Okay, so if you hold your questions to the end, and we'll either take them or ignore them. So we'll see. Thanks, Jeff. There you go.
Thank you. Well, now it's my turn, I guess. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the Conservation District and the Madison River Foundation. I've put together a pretty thorough presentation covering all these years of work on the ranch and on Odell Creek. But I just realized that I have to chuck it all out because a good portion of our team, Granger Ranch's team, is here tonight, and they're going to bust me on half of this stuff. But at great risk, I am going to stick to my guns, I guess. And I did want to add that I don't like looking down at my slides, but I'll completely lose track if I don't. So I occasionally will not be looking at you when I'm talking. But I guess the place to start is a little context. I have to provide some context for the project. The project's taking place on Granger Ranches and also on our neighbor, the Longhorn Ranch. And it's a pretty intensive private-public collaboration between the ranches, government agencies, nonprofits, private philanthropy. The River Foundation's involved. Thank you very much for that. So it's all happening on Granger Ranches, which, like many of the ranches and all the ranches in our area, is a cattle ranch. That's our primary enterprise. We're not a wildlife preserve, although by the time I finish this presentation, you might disagree with that statement. We put up a lot of hay to feed those cattle, like many other people who are ranching in this area and in the West. And here's an astonishing thing. I don't know if you can read that from where you are, but when I saw this, it kind of blew my mind. This is from a Bloomberg report on land usage. 41% of the contiguous United States is dedicated to livestock production, either grazing or crops. So what we're doing, we're in good company. We're not that unusual, but we also, as John said, are involved in a pretty major environmental project. It's happening here in the Madison watershed. Our watershed starts up in Yellowstone National Park and goes to Three Forks. And for anybody either listening in or who may not know exactly what that means, a watershed, it's basically a geographic area that drains or flows to a unique and common point. So our watershed starts up in Yellowstone and it ends in Three Forks. And if you can see this map behind me, around Cameron is where Granger Ranches is. And that area from Cameron to basically Ennis Lake, I'm told at one point in time was one of the largest wetlands in Montana, about 8,000 acres. That's where we are working. I guess when I look at this image, I'm thinking this river system and its tributaries connects all of us. You know, no matter what our pursuits and interests are, it's all about the water. Without that water, we could turn the lights off and close up shop. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Water is central to that. The need and demand for that water is increasing, and potentially the supply is decreasing. So you can see right there where the problem is. And one of the elements of the Odell Creek restoration and other things that we are doing and other people are doing is water conservation. Wetlands store and clean water. So the 17 or 15 miles of stream restoration, and I'm guessing maybe about 1,000 acres of wetland restoration, it's essentially building a gigantic reservoir. Those wetland soils store the water, they clean it, and they release it oddly at a time of year where everything else is dropping off. So the flows in Odell Creek increase throughout the year and provide cold, clean water to the Madison River. So we're going to get into exactly what we did, but I want to make two notes to kind of key it up. First of all, the project and everything that's taken place surrounding it has been unbelievably transformative on lots of levels, on just so many levels. You'll kind of see that in the presentation. And the other thing is the actual work of restoring wetlands and streams is, in a way, almost a form of modern day alchemy. To see where we started and where we ended up, it's sort of like that thing of making gold out of, or something precious out of weird components. You know, rivers and river systems have captured the attention of man since time immemorial. And I was really struck by this quote, which is, speaking of rivers metaphorically, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. That was 500 BC, Heraclitus, Greek philosopher. When I saw that quote, I thought, gee, that could have been written about Odell Creek. That could have been written about me. Because the transformation has been land and water and people. And that includes me. So here we go. One of the reasons the project was needed was in the 1950s, what was a wetland was they tried to dry it up. And the reason they did that was it wasn't some, you know, evil plot. It was actually, you know, when you think about it sort of from a twisted logic perspective, they were trying to expand usable agricultural acres. So to make it easier to hay, to graze cattle, it was very wet, and it was, you know, hard to get a horse in there. It was hard to graze cattle. Equipment would get stuck. So this went on across the West, and on Granger Ranches, there were 5 to 6 miles of drainage canals excavated into the ground. The idea was to intercept groundwater and lower the water table, if you can believe that. The house that you see in the bottom of this picture is no longer there, but that's where the haying crew lived in the summer, at the bottom of the hill. Jerry and Billy and all, you know where that is. A little closer view of this canal being excavated. And so this is kind of what it looked like when we started. The canals were excavated. No one really stopped to consider, or really cared for that matter, because their interests were different. That over time, these drainage canals eroded, they deepened. There were some down there that you could stand in and you'd be, you know, it was like being underground. They were that deep. So they had a couple of effects on Odell Creek and the system downstream, which is they were warmer, they were shallow, so any fish that got into them were easy pickings for predatory birds, and they set sediment downstream. The creek itself was impaired, had issues. It had become over-widened. It was down-cut. If you look at that picture in the bottom left, you can see the relationship of the water to the ground and the raw banks that were sloughing off, putting sediment in the water. And a lot of its sinuosity was gone too. And the problem there is it got shallower, wider, warmer, and without the sinuosity on a system, a spring creek system, the system can no longer move sediments. So then your gravels get clogged and you lose your spawning. So this is where we started, and this was the conditions. And when this was done, it was done with certainty that this was a good thing to do. And once again, because I like quotes and historic figures, I thought of this quote, which I had seen elsewhere, and it caught my eye. Will Rogers, who was a popular entertainer of the 1930s and political humorist, he said, "It isn't what we don't know that gives us trouble, it's what we know that ain't so." And so they thought this was the right thing to do. It was at the time, but it had long-term consequences. So we started thinking about what we knew and what we didn't know and what we knew that ain't so. And a team started coming together to investigate and discuss if anything could be done to change the scenario. And basically the stars lined up, because we like to refer to ourselves as the A team. I'm the bench warmer, but these guys are the A team. And so that's John Mulfeld from River Design Group on the right, hydrologist, Rob Hazelwood, wildlife biologist in the center, and Don Peters, a fisheries biologist on the left. And we started poring over aerial images and old maps and historic documents, accounts, anything we could get our hands on to try to figure out what it was like before Odell Creek was altered. We spent a lot of time in the field investigating conditions down there. Surveys were started, and then the Ghostbusters came in. Actually, this is a part of the River Design Group team, but they used a lot of technology like GPS, drones. We even did, I don't have a picture of it, but something called LiDAR flights, where we flew the area parallel flight lines with a specially equipped fixed wing aircraft with a LiDAR camera. And this shoots laser beams down at the ground and can produce a topographical model that's accurate to centimeters. And so in this picture, they're creating a high resolution map. So between the LiDAR data and the mapping, it's kind of hard to see, but this is sort of an image compiled from LiDAR, and you can see where one of these straight drainage canals are. You can see some other features on the land, and then a blue squiggly line, which is kind of where they thought the new channel should be built. But we came up with some goals, and these are kind of important. The first one, and I think the most important one, was reconnect the channel with the floodplain. That means getting the water back up on the surface of the ground, reactivating oxbow meanders, so bends in the creek, reduce the channel to width ratio, channel width depth ratio. Backwater wetlands were sort of interesting. We'll get into that. One of the unique things about this project, going back to that picture of the pros who were working on this. So this is not the first time a stream has been restored in Montana or anywhere else. But what was, I think, unique about this is that we weren't just thinking about fish. We were thinking about migratory birds and wetlands and other mammals and plants and things. So all of that was incorporated into these objectives. And then engineering plans were created. Now, when I first looked at this, it was sort of like looking at and this is just an example of one section of one project, but it's like looking at a Rorschach test, if you in the psychiatrist's office and they give you the ink blotter thing, I was like looking at this going, what the hell is that? But, I did learn to vaguely understand it. You can see where the stream channel was going to be built, depths and elevations on the bottom, fills, and also cross sections were created. So this shows you widths and depths in various parts of the stream, from riffles to pools to runs and glides. And so this was for a specific part of the stream that had a 65 CFS water flow. But now it starts getting interesting, because all this information was taken and translated into a form that the equipment operators could actually see in their excavators, dump trucks, etc. And they build the project two-dimensionally to that engineering plan. And you can see in this picture the bucket of the excavator, his digging depth, widths, depths, whether he's digging a pool or a riffle or whatever. And when I tell you that these guys are precise, I watched him one day put a boulder in the creek, and he put the bucket of his excavator on it, looked at his screen, shook his head, picked the boulder up, literally threw it to the side, and got a different boulder. So that's how precise these guys were building. So work started in 2005. So we started filling these drainage canals. And it was pretty intense, because that expression, if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. We broke a lot of eggs, and it was kind of scary to watch. But then a couple of years later, after we'd started filling, we started rebuilding stream channels. And then, what does that mean? Well, we were digging out pools up here, building new stream banks. Here, this is a new meander being constructed, and what it looked like a year later. Blew my mind. So the process of restoring the stream, I found it fascinating, because you go from the engineering plans to the equipment arriving to the first various stages of staging various materials along the project, marking the center line of where the stream channel is going to go, the banks, and then the rough shaping begins. And this is very rough shaping here. Some of this rough shaping was done in the dry. They were able to block water flow and send it to a different place. And some was done, in live water. And as you can see, it was quite a mess. And as I was watching this, as interesting as it was, I was going, God, what is this going to look like when these guys leave? What a mess. The other interesting technique is they harvested sods, not any sods, but they sought out sods that had the right vegetation in it for bank material, sedges and rushes. And luckily, that was one of the unique things about the project too, was that most of the materials that were needed to do it were on site. So these borrow sites were typically areas that were going to become inundated with water once the project was done. So these sods were harvested, hauled to the location that we happen to be working. And you can note these white things on the back of the excavator are GPS antennas. These are machine grade GPS equipped excavators. And they literally build to within centimeters. So they took those sods and then they built the banks like you would tile a bathroom. I mean, when you talk about talent, these equipment operators, to watch them do this was really amazing. So this is a really good example, this picture of kind of what went on, or what is going on. On the right of the screen, you can see sort of a newly meandering stream. At the bottom of the picture, without any, by the way, the water's not in the channel. Riffle, a new bank that's built kind of in the center of the picture, and then the excavator backfilling behind that bank. So when I mentioned alchemy, you've seen now sort of the mess that went on while we were building. The only way that I can explain the next pictures is that there is an alchemy, a form of magic, and this might be it. So to go from what you've just seen to this in a couple of years, it's unbelievable to me anyway. And so what you have there is a spring creek flowing through at the surface of the ground, really robust vegetation growing on the sides. And one of the unique things that we came up with on this project, and I don't take credit for this, but I was there when it happened, was this idea that the channel the stream shouldn't be always contained within the channel, so that there were backwater wetlands, and they provided habitat for birds and insects and juvenile fish. So the habitat's really diverse. Another example of how vigorous the system is. Lots of water, great vegetation, diverse vegetation. We'll get into that. Very, very healthy. We also, besides the stream work, we constructed open water and emergent wetlands. And so once again, the wetland component of this is really important for habitat, for storing and cleaning water, and because it historically was a wetland. So now, because I'm in Ennis, Montana, and giving a presentation, somebody told me you have to put a picture of a fish in it. So for you aficionados of fish, here's a fish picture, and here's another. But I didn't put these pictures in here because of these fish. I put them in here because of this water. I mean, you look at this picture, this is cold, clean, high quality, healthy water that flows down system into the Madison River, into the Missouri River, and all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. But now I'm going to disappoint the fish fans by telling you that the project's really not about fish. It's about habitat. And that habitat, when you do a project like this, what I've learned is that you don't build for a specific species. You build for habitat, and if the habitat's good, it takes care of lots of species, from small mammals like river otters in the bottom right, amphibians, migratory birds, and large ungulates, of a lot of different species of large ungulates, including deer. There's a little fawn in the grass, pronghorn, elk. And by the way, these elk are clearing a wildlife-friendly fence. The project is surrounded by wildlife-friendly fencing, and moose. So, we all get excited about iconic apex species. But to me, oddly, and I didn't expect this to happen, the thing that I found and am finding the most interesting about this project is related to vegetation. So when we reestablished the hydrology of the floodplain, one of the lucky breaks we caught, and one of the unique things about that area, is that it had never been farmed. And so the seed sources for the wetland vegetation that was there historically, we discovered, and everybody was sort of shocked by this, was still viable after 50, 60 years of being dry. And so we restored that hydrology, and we started seeing some really unique vegetation. As the slide says, rare and sensitive flowers, very few populations within the state. That primrose on the right is the largest population of primrose, of this species of primrose, outside of Alaska. So how it got there, who knows, but that's the case. So we started seeing this really interesting conversion of vegetation from basically a monoculture of upland grasses to all kinds of things, including these flowering plants. There's the paintbrush, dense vegetation, Rocky Mountain bee flower all over the place. I'd never seen that down there before. This one's going to stump me. Mountain golden banner, that's what this is called. I think you get the picture. Very diverse. Sunflowers and phlox, which is blooming right now. The other interesting thing that happened was I showed you that technique that was used to rebuild the banks with sod mats. Well, this is what we call the happy accident, because no one expected this one. But the sod mats must have had fragments of willow in them. There was no willow down there when we started. So when we restored the banks and the banks became wet, those fragments started to grow. And so now we're seeing willow along Odell Creek In fact, we have 8 different species of willow. This one is called a peach leaf willow. Once again, amazingly diverse. And if I can digress for a second, I think diversity is a big part of resilience, and resilience is super important in our day and age. So this vegetation is part of that resiliency. We're also doing some willow cuttings. The jury's out on that. They're protected from browsing, as you can see here, and some trees. So the idea with these woody plant species is shade, root systems holding the banks and soils together, and bird habitat. And beautiful too, by the way. It's beautiful. So as part of this vegetation convergence, is that the right way of saying it? I think you all know what I mean. We've also been working to eradicate invasive species of plants. We have great people doing that. This is the team from Basic Biological Services. So we've been spraying weeds. As a result, we don't have many weeds down there, but we stay on top of it. And by the way, here's the secret to any kind of restoration project: is you have to have a dog in the pickup. It doesn't work unless you have that. So, you know, that's what's happening on the surface of the ground, but it's just as important what's happening in the water. And we're seeing a recovery of submergent plant communities, including sago pondweed, potamogeton, which is important for trumpeter swans and other waterfowl. It's a food source, 7 years after restoration. Another picture of submergent vegetation. So, you know, fish cover, good for insects, and food for migratory birds and trumpeter swans. And it's almost like looking at a coral reef. I mean, it's really crazy looking. I did not mention that one of the unique things about this project is the amount of monitoring that's going on. It's very unusual. So we're monitoring, and I'll show you some of these reports. There's someone studying this plant change named Tara Luna, great name, and she's done amazing work, and this is the cover of one of her reports. So, you know, John Muir said, when you pull on one thing in nature, you find it connected to everything else. So you get new plants, you get new insects. And this is an insect I'd never seen before, but now it's just everywhere down there, called a yellow-collared scape moth. And it's an unusual moth in that it's active during the daytime. And it's really beautiful. But, you know, once again, this whole sort of cascade of effect and results. The insect populations are being studied by David Stagliano, known as the bug guy for Montana Biological Survey. And so when you get insects and you have habitat and water, you get a lot of birds. The first survey of birds we did down there was 11 species. We're now at around 130. Maybe the birds, along with the vegetation, is my favorite part, because it's really amazing to see. These are, and you have different kinds of birds: grassland birds, shorebirds. This is a shorebird, American avocet. This kind of blew my mind. These are ibis and stilts in flight down there. Gulls, more gulls, blackbirds, curlews, meadowlarks, eagles, cranes. So the raptors, you know, you have the golden eagles, American kestrel. And this is kind of cool, what they call secretive marsh birds. So, I mean, if you look in the center of this picture, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a bird right there. And that's it. It's an American bearded bittern. And one of the biologists who I've been working with, when we saw the first bittern down there, said, you know, Jeff, that's like building a forest and having a grizzly bear show up. So sandhill cranes are very prominent in this area, and they use the area for mating, nesting, and staging pre-migration. And that's quite a sight. I think Greg and Jeannie, who are in the back, have seen the cranes as they're gathering, and, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of cranes using the area right before they get ready to take off. And not to feather my own nest, but we have a lot of ducks too. In fact, since the project started, we've seen, and this is kind of old data, but 900% increase in ducks and a 600% increase in species of ducks. So lots of ducks. You know, you would, not surprising, it's a wetland. There's lots of open water. You probably know about this because it's been kind of talked about, but one of the birds that was missing was the trumpeter swan. And so when we, as the project progressed over the years, one of the biologists made us aware of an ongoing effort to help recover the trumpeter swan, which is threatened. And in fact, I was shocked to read just the other night, in 2018, there were 2 pairs of swans left in Yellowstone Park. So we've been putting in, I think the last couple of years we've been off, but the years that we've done this, we release 5 to 7 young swan cygnets. They are raised in captivity. They're about 82 days to 100 days old when we release them. They're flightless at that age, but where they learn to fly, they usually return to nest. And so the goal of this project, as part of the project, is to basically restart a sustainable population of trumpeter swans in the Madison Valley. They're an amazing bird to watch. If they're not the largest bird in North America, they're the second. I'm not sure if the American condor is bigger, but the wingspan on these birds is 6 feet. And I think the efforts are probably successful. I mean, I'm seeing more and more swans all the time. This is a shot from last winter. It seems to be a preferred place during the winter time. And that's probably because Odell Creek and many of these wetlands do not freeze in the wintertime, whereas the Madison River does. So lots of swans. And they recently captured one and collared it with a solar-powered GPS collar so they can track it. And, you know, once again, a big part of this project is research. And so there's a lot of research going on, whether it's migratory birds, swans, fish, plant communities, etc. But here's the swan about to be released after the collar was put back on it. And that is an image that was texted to me by the guy who runs the swan program down in Wyoming, showing flight lines of where one of these swans has gone. So as I mentioned, lots of research, reporting, monitoring. The bird work is being done by the University of Montana Bird Ecology Lab. This is their report. It's really cool that they're studying this, and they use some interesting techniques to do that. You know, of course, the traditional get out on the ground and look, see what's around. They also put out speakers and pre-recorded bird calls to see if they get a response from the call. It's one way they can identify birds that you can't see easily. We've also used drones to get up and survey ponds, and this particular drone was modified to be, you know, quieter than your typical drone. Now, I just saw this the other day, since we're talking about birds and all the great things that are happening with birds in the Madison Valley and on Odell Creek. The bad news is that since 1970, we've lost 3 billion birds. That's astonishing. So the work we're doing down there and to see all these different species sort of using it is really encouraging, because I think it's, you know, more of that's done, whether it's here or elsewhere, we address that problem. We're also surveying fish to see, you know, we're not just patting ourselves on the back going, doesn't that look pretty? We want to know what's going on with the system, if the restoration work is actually improving the fish population, species, the age classes of fish, and so on. We're taking the temperature of the stream every minute in various places. This is a tube with a data logger in it. So it's taking flows and temperatures, and we have several places on the stream where we're doing And what we've seen as a result of the restoration, this is phase 2, so this goes back a ways, but the maximum temperature was reduced to 58 degrees, which is really good for cold water fish species. By comparison, of course, well, I'll offer 2 examples for comparison. One is that pre-restoration, the temperature was much higher and the daily fluctuation was much greater. So on a warm day, the water temperature would jump up, and on a cold day, it would drop way down. And then, of course, we all know that the Madison River and other rivers in this area actually have been closed recently because of temperature. So one of the benefits of the Odell project to the river system is that the more of this we do, the higher the water quality, the colder the water, and it all flows into the Madison just above Ennis Lake, which is a big thermal collector. So, you know, I knew very little about this when I started. That's the understatement of the century. But I kept hearing about connectivity. You know, we're going to reconnect the floodplain, the water to the floodplain, and we're going to reconnect migratory this and that. And I never heard anybody talk about people. And I've started thinking that one of those reconnections that's probably the most important is reconnecting people. And that's what we're doing here this evening with these ideas and these possibilities. And so we've had lots of people come to the ranch, different groups, Ecology Project International, Service Project up there. My niece who just graduated from college is right there, Caitlin. Montana Range Tour, Montana Outdoor Science School, Teton Outdoor Science School. Lots of high school kids, college kids, grad students. These are grad students in the fisheries department at MSU. So this idea of reconnecting people to each other, to the land, to these ideas, to conservation is super important, I think, because if, you know, I think more and more the world is going in a different direction. And if people aren't aware of the problems, aren't aware of the solutions or the possibilities, you know, we just spend all our time looking at our phones. And so, you know, amongst the groups that have come in here are different veteran groups to fish. And, you know, one of my hopes in doing this has been to get people to experience what I experience, and to also learn that private working lands are critically important, that people out there in the agricultural community are dedicated land stewards. And if we're going to deal with habitat, if we're going to deal with climate, if we're going to deal with all kinds of things, it has to happen on private land. And it has to happen as a collaborative effort. And you know, when I started this, I basically proceeded on faith, and it was a little scary because, you know, I was working with people I didn't know, and, you know, we were changing a lot of things on the ranch. But I'm here today to tell you that collaboration is a good thing, but also to tell you that it's part of, if we're not successful as an agricultural operation, we can't continue doing this. So it's very symbiotic. And speaking of that agricultural operation, I guess, you know, this brings us to where we are today. I kind of want to recognize our manager, Billy Whitehurst, who's right here, who manages the cattle and does such a terrific job with our grazing, and Jerry Dickinson, who was the manager before him. You know, I've had a lot of great support and a lot of great partners. And, you know, this wasn't my deal. This was, everybody pitched in. So where are we today? Well, you know, our ranch operation is it's symbiotic. We're growing our ranch operation at the same time that we're growing our environmental component. And we've taken a lot on. We've created some serious challenges for ourselves now because, you know, now we have to figure out how we're going to operate and manage and take care of what we've just spent a long time and a lot of money doing. And to that end, you know, we've done things like, here's a picture of a bridge across Odell Creek in an alleyway where we move our cattle without getting, you know, trampling the banks. So, you know, those challenges that we've created have also come with incredible opportunities, because as we've restored this floodplain, we're getting a lot more, as you saw, a lot more vegetation, a lot more forage, and therefore it's good for our cattle who need that forage. So we're using a lot of electric fence. Billy's does an amazing job with that, but I should point out that the River Foundation actually came to me many years ago, and knowing that I was doing this restoration project, and said, how'd you like to do a project with us? And I said, well, what do you have in mind? And they said, David Bricker, were you there at that meeting? They wanted us to fence our cattle off the Madison River. You know, I didn't quite know how to take that. I thought, geez, I would think people would like to see our cattle in the Madison River. But truthfully, when the river would drop, the cattle would take off. And Jerry probably spent a lot of time dealing with that. So protecting the riparian of the Madison River with electric fence also helped us manage our cattle. We've now taken that to a whole nother level where we're establishing pasture systems and timed and rotational grazing. We're playing with and trying every new gimmick and tool that we can come up with, like this electric fence winder that I found in Australia, believe it or not, saving a lot of time, labor, and blood, sweat, and tears. Solar-powered stock watering systems, and wildlife-friendly fencing. You know, these are all tools that we're using to manage within the context of this very significant, important, and wonderful restoration project. And wonderful, you know, I mean, the project could only be what it is if the resource was there. We have a very unique resource. So we're trying everything that we can. And this relationship between grazing and the restoration, the regeneration, is really, really important. A lot of people don't understand this, but you know, because of the restoration, as I said, we have more forage, which means we can have more cattle. And for the first time last winter, we grazed some of these areas very carefully, very amazingly well done. And to harvest some of that old decadent grass and open up the canopy of the ground and allow sunlight and water to penetrate for new grasses. So this is what it looked like when we finished, and this is what it looked like just a few days ago. You can see that dividing line where the electric fence was, and this doesn't look quite as good as this. So go team, that was really great. So I have bad news, which is that the sun is setting on my presentation. But I want to end with just a couple of things, which is everything that you've seen and learned about tonight, those benefits flow downstream with the water. Water is central to every pursuit. It doesn't matter whether you're ranching, farming, producing electricity, you need domestic water, you're manufacturing, whatever. There's a increasing demand for water, and there's less of it. And so the Odell project is really, you know, at its heart about water and conserving it and improving the quality. So I guess I'll just end by saying that, you know, very often people ask me, why did you do this? And I've never really stopped to think much about why I did it. But here's a couple of things that you should be aware of, because this is kind of why I did it. Every 2.5 minutes, the American West loses a football field worth of natural area to human development. 40 acres are lost every hour. Now here's a real important one. Working lands represent one of the best hopes for conservation. That's the National Audubon Society. 73% of our nation's lands is privately owned, and the majority of our fish and wildlife resources occur in those lands. That's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So, you know, we put our ranch into a conservation easement to protect it, to keep it open space. And I guess I'll just end by saying that I kind of feel While livestock production is our 24/7, 365 enterprise, I think we're in the open space business. I think we're in the clean water business. I think we're in the clean air business. And I think we're in the habitat business. And I think perhaps in the future, we're going to be in the carbon sequestration business. And so, so that's why I did it. And that's why we continue to do it. We hope to do more phases going forward. And we hope that other people look at what we've done and pick up the ball and run with it, because it can be done anywhere. So I don't know what else I can add to that. I think I covered most of it, and I thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Amazing stuff. Appreciate it. So I guess at this point, we'll open it up to questions or comments, thoughts to the group here. Katie, have you got some questions or notes that come in from the chat as well?
Not yet, but I'm sure
okay.
they'll come in.
So we'll go ahead and start here. Go ahead and talk.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I think you did a fantastic job with the presentation. I think that that you actually received national attention and recognition for your work. That's something that is just fabulous. What has the reaction been from the ranchers in Montana?
It's a good question, and I'm going to give you my most honest answer. At first, I felt like people were waiting for me to fail. But then I think, for instance, our neighbor, and I totally understand this, was sort of in a wait and see mode. See how I was the guinea pig. And then they started seeing they liked. And I think that, as I said, the ranching operation, I think, has benefited from the conservation work. And I think you'd have to be blind not to see that. And so, I think there's still reluctance out in the world for sidling up to environmental groups and nonprofits and what have you. But I think that there's a sort of a quantum shift happening there too. And part of that, quite honestly, I mean, ranching has always been a tough game, but you've probably read about and heard about fertilizer prices going up and cost of fuel and all the other inputs. So for my money, anything that you can do to diversify your operation, if it's going to bring in a few dollars or improve the value of your property, your assets, it's a no-brainer.
But it's an easier case to make, I would assume, when you can show that it's actually benefited the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
And is that something the ranchers are starting to maybe?
Well, I do think, sort of on a macro level, based on my experience and conversations with people kind of around the West, that's true, that there's a lot of interest in this kind of thing. And it's not just, stream and wetland restoration. It might be restoration of tall grass prairies or ferrets or, there are people out there doing all kinds of things. And so I think the answer is yes. I think there's more and more interest in that. And, as I said, most of the ranchers I know are tremendous land stewards, and they'll do anything they can to improve habitat or their land. But, it's an interesting thing, I think, based on what I see, that, everybody wants these things. When these groups come to the ranch, I ask them, who here is against clean air and clean water? Raise your hand, right? And they all look at me like, who's this nut, right? And then nobody raises their hand. And I say, oh, good, we're all in agreement. So how do we pay for it? So, getting back to your question, you can't expect people to disproportionately carry that burden. And therein lies the problem, right? I mean, because, your job's raising cattle or crops or whatever, and, that's hard enough.
I have a follow-up question to that. How have the neighboring ranches worked with and benefited from your project?
Well, as I said, the neighboring ranch, the Longhorn Ranch, did, no pun intended, jump in with both feet eventually. Um, uh, I think everybody's benefiting from this because source, and so if you're an irrigator downstream, I believe what we've done is protecting your water. And the vegetation that we talked about, we're a gigantic seed bank. So the wind and the currents of the water, those seeds take off. And so, so I think there are benefits to others, and even the raised water table, the improved hydrology. I'm sure the benefits of that go well downstream of where we are right now.
Go ahead.
Porter, hi.
First, I wanted to commend you.
Oh, thank you.
I've seen you do things, variations of this thing for several years, getting better and better. That's powerful. The question I've got is, are there characteristics of Odell Creek that make it a better candidate than other streams for this kind of project?
I think everything, all streams and potential restoration projects are probably unique. I think the thing about Odell Creek, like I said, most of it goes through a wetland. So you have those soils. The wetland vegetation, the roots are unbelievable, right? So they're holding the banks together. I think that's one of the reasons the stream went the other way prior to restoration, is when the area was dried up and drained, those wetland plants could no longer get the water they needed. So they went out and no longer held the stream together. So yeah, I mean, as I said, the material stuff we needed to do this project was all right there. So that was, in and of itself, a cost savings, because in other restorations, some of the stuff would, like rock, gravel, grasses would have to be hauled in, and of course that increases the expense. So there's no denying that Odell Creek is a very unique environment, and lots of water coming from all kinds of directions, and so yes, it does lend itself to restoration. Like you saw, it recovers incredibly quickly. I mean, the chaos and mess that's created during the rebuilding is scary. But these guys are so good, and they promise me, oh, don't worry about this, it's going to look great, and it did. So yeah.
What was the total cost of the project, and can you provide an estimate as to the cost of the benefits your wonderful project provides?
I cannot provide a economic breakdown of benefits, because I just don't know how you would quantify that. But there's no doubt, and I was going to mention this in the body of the presentation, but it just kind of gets out in the weeds, that environmental issues are mostly, a good portion of them are economic issues. So one economic issue is what it costs to do something like this, and where does that money come from? So I'm not going to get into what the project cost, but I will say that funding came from private enterprise, from power companies, from philanthropy, from the two ranches involved, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and it was really hard to put that money together. And you'd think after all the success we've had, it would get easier. It doesn't. And so there's only so much money out in the world, and these projects are really expensive. David?
Can I ask a follow-up that goes along with that? Have you found it over the length of this project easier or harder to find money, to find sources, and to find partners to work
certainly no easier to find the money. Finding partners is not that difficult. But you know, we have sort of a core group that comes together whenever we do this, which, as I said, is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Northwestern Energy, the ranch is involved, occasional philanthropy. Yeah, so it's really difficult, and that's the limiting factor on doing this, you know, anywhere. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I got a chance to go down there with you and your mother and take a look at what you did, and it's incredible.
Well, thank you.
I thank you for that. My question is on the other side of the highway, through the Jeffers area and everything, does that need some restoration down there where the ranches?
Oh, you're talking about Odell Creek where it
Odell
continues?
Creek, as it keeps going down.
You know, I can't really say because I don't know every inch of that, you know, the stream down there where it's not on our property. But you know what's really different about that section of the creek is that it's subject to the gorge of the Madison River. And so it's quite different. And because of the disturbance of the gorge, there's more woody plant species, and there always has been, perhaps because of the grazing history too. And so I think it does not need as much restoration. That would be my guess. You know, other places probably do. We have more that I'd like to do. Yeah, so I don't know, but my guess is it's probably pretty good.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah,
for
sure.
everything you did up there.
Porter, ma'am, you had a question.
So as you have gone through the restoration, have you identified any negatives to your ranching operation? And if you have, how did you address them?
So long term, I'm just trying to think about negatives. I can't really think of any. Really? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I mean, it's changed the dynamics of how the ranch is utilized. You know, it's the Odell Creek, it's a winter habitat, winter grazing range for livestock, just due to the nature of the ground. That's the best time to use it. But negative, no. I mean, it's opened up so many more feed resources for winter grazing, and it's creating more options and diversity in the ranch as far as what we can do with the livestock and the crops that are available for sale. So I can think of it.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I mean, when I first met Billy and we talked about what you were doing across the valley, you know, we're on the side of the Jeff and kind of bringing that over here and talking to Jeff about the change of operations and how you guys were looking at certain things. And we went over there with the folks from Montana Western, the kids from the college there, and they were talking about conflict resolution and stuff like that. And so from the standpoint of these college kids learning about conflict resolution, whether it's environmental, whether it's between one group and the other, and seeing what you guys had evolved to, where you were going into that rotational grazing down within the ranch itself versus up on the benches, and to hear about, you know, last year coming off of a drought and having severe lack of feed available throughout the valley, whether it's on your own lands that you're, you know, growing alfalfa or other feed versus year, and you were able, you know, you get to the end of the year and you go, how many heifers are we going to have to ship out and sell off because we're not going to have enough feed to all of a sudden go and we don't have to sell off or ship out any heifers because we've got it all right here with this new program. So the challenges and the benefits seem to be very symbiotic.
Totally. You know, I wanted to add that this is a work in progress, and our ranch operation is a work in progress. And, you know, that's one of the fun things about it is, you know, we're learning and, you know, constantly adapting to or trying to adapt to opportunities and challenges. And so I can't think of a downside. I mean, when you know, most people would kill to have that much water. You know, whether you're a rancher or I don't know anybody. And so to have, you know, I caught a major lucky break. I mean, to have the opportunity to do this and to have an amazing group of people come together, talented scientists and people who've spent careers doing this, great equipment operators, vegetation ecologists who live in the back of their Subaru while they're down there on hands and knees, you know, looking for plants. It's been incredible, you know, and to see the symbiotic relationship between ranching, land preservation, and this. You know, obviously it's worth protecting, right? I mean, this is so rare that I didn't mention that an interesting statistic that wetlands comprise only 2% or less of the American West, and yet 90 some odd percent of all living things use them for either all or part of their life cycles. So when you think about biodiversity, the extinction crisis that's being talked about, water crisis that's being talked about, energy crisis that's being talked about, somehow the Odell project is like in the middle of all those things. And so, you know, the fact that wetlands are so rare, and because probably of a warming climate, they're going to be rarer. I look back on you know, and when we started this, I was only thinking about fish. But my thinking has evolved, and doesn't mean it's good thinking. It's just changed. Yeah, Greg.
Jeff deserves a lot of credit for what he's done out there, but one person he hasn't mentioned who also gave him the opportunity to do this was his mom,
Right.
who passed away recently at 95. She was a remarkable woman and kept that ranch going through tough times, good times and tough times, and kept it all together. And when Jeff grew up, he took advantage of the opportunity and made this all happen. But she deserves credit.
Thanks, Greg. That's really true. And just to add to that, there wouldn't be a Granger Ranches if not for my mother. It was she was the heart and the soul of it, and just loved it, and even up until her very end, she was in the pickup truck with me, bouncing around, looking at birds, and excited about the future. Porter, did you have another question? Dr. Hoff.
What specifically, what have you got left to do?
We'll have a beer.
Besides-
Well, you know, I'm estimating, you know, we've restored 15 miles of the stream. I'm guessing we probably have a third more to go if we were going to do it all. There's so many little channels and so many areas, and you know, there's some kind of on the upper end and there's some kind of down here. So there's more we could do. The question is, are we going to do it? I don't know the answer to that. I hope so. I hope so. I hope maybe somebody will take it over from me.
Someone did ask what your estimated timeline is for that.
For finishing?
Mhm.
So I have a stock answer when people ask me, when are you going to be finished? Which is never. Because and that's true because you know, I started in preparation for tonight. I tried to come up with a definition for what is restoration, because you know, I have friends all over the place, big cities, you know, foreign countries, and they're like, "The hell, restoration? What does that mean?" Well, it's simple. It's taking action to restart ecological processes with the goal being a full biological function. And so the work that you saw in this presentation, that's just the start, right? Nature does the rest, and it takes a long time. And so, so the answer to the question about finishing is never, because nature hopefully will never be done. You know, I'll be part of the soil profile at some point in time and be contributing in a different way. not to be morbid or anything.
Go ahead, Maggie.
I was wondering, do you think there's any policies or like any ways to incentivize this kind of thing for other ranchers? And also, like, it seemed like there was a lot of like startup money that was required. And do you think like over time you're able to make that back through like the denser vegetation or no?
I really like you. That's the best question of the night, and you just opened a gigantic can of worms. So, you know, we talk about incentives, incentivizing this kind of work, and the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has lots of programs to do various things out on the land, you know, including wetland work. And I hate the word incentivize. I think the reason I really like your question is I see it as an investment. And like any investment, there should be a return on that investment. And so this is what you call political will. And as a society deciding how we're going to spend the limited money that is in a national or state budget, right? And so to my way of thinking, there should be some sort of system whereby we as a society, where appropriate, can invest in this kind of work, whether that's through tax dollars or some other thing, I don't know. But so the answer to your question, I think, is yes. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess I was also wondering, like, do you think that you've been able to like break even or make a profit from like all the like?
Well, to be honest with
investment.
Yeah. To be honest with you, you know, when I said I think we're in the clean air and clean water business, the problem with those businesses is I haven't figured out how to monetize them, right? But I think we've added a tremendous amount of value to our property, and you know, we have been able to derive some diverse income from doing that. If I was to add up all the time that I've spent on this, you know, I don't know. I just don't know. But it's been worth it, you know, and a lot of other people have done the same thing. That's why I couldn't really answer the question of what did the project cost. I mean, I know roughly, but there's been so much pro bono work and so many other things that you know, it's just, A, I would probably be wrong, and B, I don't think about it in terms of dollars and cents. So, but we certainly hasn't cost us. So,
Laz, you're addressed as Laz.
Who could that be?
What parts of your project do you see as most scalable, most applicable to different sites, habitats, states, etc.?
That's a good question. Well, you know, the restoration work of the stream and the wetlands is scalable because, as I said, originally it was an 8,000 acre wetland, and it's not that anymore. But if we kept working, you know, we could approach, you know, some greater number than what we have now. You know, I think this is scalable on sort of a general level. By virtue of the model that it's created, meaning that maybe in some other state or even some other country, there's a need like there was here to do this. And this project could be referenced in terms of, you know, how the partnership came together and where money came from and all of that kind of thing. So I don't know beyond that how to answer that question.
That it for questions? Okay, awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you again. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Since you're willing to do this and not charge for it, it's been fantastic. But in all seriousness, your investment into this community, into the resource in the watershed of Mass River is one that deserves a round of applause, and we appreciate all of you and of course your mother have done. Jeff probably doesn't even know this part, but I didn't get to meet his mom or spend a lot of time with her as much as some other folks, but in the last 2 years, we did have quite a few chance meetings or on purpose meetings as Jeff and I would get together and talk about the creek or go visit the creek. And Jeff probably didn't notice this, but after our first meeting, it might have run over a little bit, been a little bit longer than we probably told Mom what it was going to take. And so each subsequent meeting after that, as I'd get out of my truck and I'd look into Jeff's truck, she'd be there and she'd point at me and she'd point at her watch. I don't think you knew that.
No.
But she wanted to be sure that I knew that she was keeping track of time, and the last time we met, it took too long. So there's another fond memory for you, and she's been a fantastic steward to Madison, and of course Odell Creek and Granger Ranch, so we do appreciate her and your guys' history in the valley. So
Thank you. We appreciate all of you and appreciate you all coming and
yeah. So
listening to my story. I'm sticking to it.
yeah. So we'll have this. This has been recorded, as we mentioned at the beginning. It will be available. I think Ray, you're going to host it on the Conservation District's website as well as the MRF website.
We'll probably get a YouTube link or a link for it.
There'll be a link for it where you can go and check it out and re-listen and revisit. And if you've got other questions, feel free to reach out to the Conservation District or the Madison River Foundation or Jeff directly. And outside of that, we appreciate your time. There's still lots of snacks and goodies back there and drinks. So what you don't eat or take with you, Katie has to have it. And